Hello friends, today I want to talk about how writing blog articles made me a better book writer. When people think about writing books, they usually imagine the process beginning with a manuscript. The author sits down, writes chapters, revises them, and eventually turns the finished work into a book. But for me, something unexpected happened along the way. Writing articles first made me a stronger writer. Long before I focused on writing books, I spent years writing articles for my own blog, as well as publishing pieces through platforms like Yahoo and theexaminer.com. At the time, I simply saw it as sharing ideas and practicing my craft. Read that as doing what I love. What I did not realize was how much that experience was quietly shaping the way I write. More specifically, learning SEO writing for authors helped shape the way I think about clarity, audience, and communication. It taught me something that many writers overlook. Writing is not just about what we want to say, it's also about how easily our readers can receive it. And sometimes the difference between confusing writing and powerful writing comes down to something surprisingly simple: word choice. When I first began writing online articles, I started learning about SEO writing for authors. SEO stands for search engine optimization, and it is the practice of writing content in a way that helps readers find it through search engines. At first, I thought SEO was mostly about technical things like keywords and formatting, but as I studied it more closely, I realized something deeper. Good SEO writing encourages clarity. Search engines favor content that readers can understand easily. That means shorter sentences, direct language, and words that most people recognize immediately. In other words, SEO pushes writers to communicate clearly, and that lesson changed the way I write books. Writers often fall into the trap of believing that complicated language makes their work sound more intelligent, but the opposite is usually true. One of the most valuable lessons I learned through SEO writing for authors is that simple language invites readers in. Complicated language often pushes them away. If a reader has to stop every few sentences to look up a word, the experience changes. Instead of being immersed in the story or the idea, they are pulled out of it. And when that happens repeatedly, something subtle begins to occur inside the reader. They may start to feel frustrated. They may feel tired. Sometimes they even begin to feel inadequate, as though they are the problem rather than the writing itself. That emotional shift is dangerous for a writer, because the moment a reader starts feeling disconnected from the text, they are far more likely to close the book. I understand the temptation to use complicated language. I read constantly as a child and teenager, often to escape my reality. I read everything I could get my hands on. Because of that, my vocabulary grew very large, though there is always room for it to grow even more. But I digress. Because of that reading habit, I have a wide vocabulary. I could absolutely fill my writing with complex or obscure words if I wanted to. But writing is not about showing readers how much words or how many words we know. By the way, my high school English and creative writing teachers and college professors would pull their hair out to see me starting paragraphs with a subordinating conjunction, like because, and sentences with coordinating conjunctions like but. But both of those I do regularly, because that is how normal people talk, that's how I talk, which makes reading books and articles written in that way more comfortable. It is about helping our readers understand what we are trying to say. That is where SEO writing for authors becomes surprisingly helpful. It gently pushes writers toward clarity instead of complexity. When writing becomes overly complicated, readers experience several subtle disruptions. First, their reading rhythm breaks. Second, their emotional connection to the content weakens. Third, their mental energy shifts from absorbing ideas to decoding vocabulary. And when that happens repeatedly, reading stops feeling enjoyable. This is especially important for writers who want their books to be accessible to a wide audience. The goal of writing is communication, and communication works best when readers can move through the words smoothly. Readers do not need to be impressed by my grasp of the English language or how many large or complicated words I can use. That is not the point of writing. The goal was not to prove how expansive my vocabulary is, but to communicate my ideas clearly and meaningfully. What readers truly need is the ability to move through the words without friction, to understand easily what I'm trying to express, and to stay connected to the thought or story unfolding on the page. When writing becomes a showcase for vocabulary instead of a bridge for understanding, the message gets lost along the way. At the end of the day, my goal as a writer is not to impress readers with how many complicated words I know. It is not to showcase my vocabulary or prove my grasp of the English language. Writing is not a performance of intelligence. It is a bridge of understanding. I never want my words to make a reader feel inferior, confused, or as if they somehow do not belong in the conversation. I certainly do not want to create the subtle impression that I am somehow superior because I can string together long, complicated words. That is not communication, that is posturing. Readers deserve something better than that. They deserve writing that invites them in, not writing that quietly pushes them away. They deserve ideas that are clear, thoughtful, and easy to follow so they can focus on the meaning rather than struggling with the language. Because the goal of writing is not to make the writer look smart. The goal of writing is to make the idea understood. One of the surprising things I learned while writing articles and studying SEO is that writing does not need complicated words to sound thoughtful or intelligent. In fact, some of the most respected nonfiction writers rarely rely on complex vocabulary at all. Instead, they use a simple trick: clear ideas arranged in a logical flow. When a thought unfolds step by step, when sentences naturally lead to the next, readers experience the writing as intelligent and insightful, even though the language itself is simple. The strength of writing comes from the clarity of the thinking, not the size of the words. This is something I have come to appreciate deeply in my own work. I could fill paragraphs with ornate language and obscure vocabulary if I wanted to, but clear thinking expressed through everyday words often carries ideas much farther. Simple language does not make writing shallow. It makes writing accessible. And when readers can move smoothly through the ideas without struggling or stumbling over the language, I'm stumbling over these words, the message becomes stronger, not weaker. In the end, strong writing is not about using impressive words. It is about presenting meaningful ideas in a way that readers can understand, absorb, and carry with them long after they have finished the last page. So let me give a simple example, just to illustrate the difference. I want to show you something. Suppose you have two paragraphs describing the same simple moment, walking through a park. The first uses more complicated language. The second one says the same thing in everyday language. So here's the first one. As I preambulated along the serpentine pathway that meandered through the verdant expanse of the municipal park, I became increasingly cognizant of the subtle symphony of environmental stimuli surrounding me. The serration of leaves stirred by an intermittent breeze harmonized with the distant laughter of children, the rhythmic cadence of my own footsteps upon the gravel. In that moment, the atmosphere seemed endued with a quiet serenity that invited contemplation and a temporary reprieve from the frantic tempo of daily existence. Now here's version 2 that is clear, using everyday language. I walked slowly along the winding path through the park, noticing how peaceful everything felt around me. The leaves ruffled softly in the breeze, and somewhere in the distance, children were laughing near the playground. My footsteps crunched lightly on the gravel as I moved forward. For a few minutes, the world felt calm and unhurried, as if the park itself was offering a quiet place to breathe and think. So both of those describe the same moment. But the second one is easier to read, it's easier to visualize, and it's easier to feel. That is the power of clarity, and it is exactly the kind of clarity that SEO writing for authors encourages. Whereas the first one sounded pompous. Am I right? It sounded pompous. Another benefit of writing with clear language is that it builds trust. When readers can understand your words without effort, they feel comfortable moving forward through the text. The writing becomes invisible, and that is exactly what you want. The best writing does not draw attention to itself. Instead, it allows readers to focus on the ideas. the images, the emotions that are being conveyed. Clear writing removes obstacles between the author and the reader. Writing blog articles regularly gave me consistent practice communicating ideas in a clear and accessible way. Blog readers tend to skim quickly, and they rarely tolerate confusing sentences or overly complex vocabulary. If the writing feels difficult, they simply move on. That environment forced me to refine my approach. Over time, I began carrying those same habits into my book writing. Sentences became more direct, ideas more structured, and the writing easier to follow. In other words, SEO writing for authors helped me become more aware of the reader's experience. At its core, writing is about connection. It is about taking an idea that exists in one head and transmitting it into another. The clearer the language, the smoother that connection becomes. This does not mean writing must be simplistic or stripped of beauty. Some of the most powerful writing in the world uses simple words arranged in meaningful ways. But clarity matters. And one of the unexpected ways I learned that lesson was through writing blog articles and writing articles for publication. SEO taught me not just how to help readers find my work, it taught me how to make sure they actually enjoy reading it once they do. So I hope this has given you another perspective on writing as an author and my journey. And until next time, remember to stay healthy in heart.